Thank you. Thanks. I'm slightly resentful of the Battle of Ideas and Alistair for putting me in a slot on an absurdly prestigious panel last thing in the afternoon on a massive topic. So in order to take my revenge, I thought I'd start by using the start of my speech to commit a very serious criminal offence live on stage for your entertainment. It's going to be a serious crime. I'm not just going to nick Alistair's pen, but I'm going to do it now. If you're not into serious crime, I suggest you leave. But listen, here comes my crime. My daughter's been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack so much that I seriously think all of us should go down to the Victoria Theatre, which is about 10 minutes down the road, and blockade that theatre so they can't perform that show ever again. And we should crush the spirits of the Hamilton actors so they resign from their positions. The crime's finished. The crime is now over. I've committed a number of offences with what I've just said. I've actively encouraged you to go and commit a crime. If any of you agree with me, we've entered into a conspiracy to commit a crime. And I've also committed a number of potentially communications-based offences where I may have caused some of you harassment, alarm, or distress. So I'm sorry about that, but you are just one of my many victims in the context of that crime. The reason I make that point is that our speech laws are extremely broad, and the criminalisation of speech in this country is a lot more broad than people often think. Throughout this year, I've acted for a lot of extremists, specifically those who have been caught up in the UK race riots, which were, as other panellists have indicated, a massive source of national shame. I'm reluctant to use the term caught up in. It suggests a lack of agency. But what I did realise when I was answering the phone to a lot of the people who have been arrested in connection with these incidents is that they were no longer the people who were present on the riots. It was no longer the people who had even encouraged the riots at the time. What started to happen was that people were being arrested for expressing support, even qualified support, and also for expressing agreement with some of the ideas that some thought lay behind the riots. And what I gradually saw was a real creeping of something quite worrying, where a national incident, a national emergency, became a justification for something quite extreme in terms of law enforcement. And what made that all the more worrying is that ordinarily you won't hear about the people that are arrested, charged, held on remand for these offences, because their stories don't make it into the media. It might not even be in the public realm. I wanted to argue two principal things. Firstly, that there is a huge disparity in our application of our speech policing, a huge disparity in the application of the law, which has been hinted at earlier on the panel. And I wanted to say that this is a form of two-tier justice. Us lawyers like to pretend that two-tier justice doesn't exist or two-tier policing doesn't exist. But I think there is an argument that it has become embedded in the way that we enforce the law in a way that people perhaps don't appreciate. And then if I have time, I'll say a little bit about what the impact of that is on free speech. So the huge disparity in the application of the law. Imagine someone is following the riots and uses the phrase, "We should just use all our nuclear missiles on Muslims." Now, an appalling racist thing to say, expresses genocidal intent against a group of people, and would be illegal under the Communications Act. If that was tweeted, it would breach a number of criminal laws. I can say that I spoke to someone who tweeted something along those lines, not the same thing, and they're in prison. I can't say anything more than that, those are the facts. But imagine if someone had said something else. Imagine if someone had said, "We should forcibly displace 6 million people from their homes because they're Jewish." Imagine if we'd said, also, at the same time, we should internationalize a movement to bring violence against Jewish people. Both appalling, racist things to say. Yet they were both chanted week after week with the song "From the River to the Sea, Palestine will be free," and chants of "Globalize the Intifada." Two things that are racist, openly inciting, and violent things to do. So we do live in a society where laws are treated differently for different people and different citizens, and that creates a real problem for the rule of law. And I do think that that gives rise to an argument that we have what has been called two-tier justice. But what does two-tier justice actually mean? Well, I think it has three meanings, and we can unpack these. I know I'm running out of time. Firstly, 2 minutes. Okay. 1 minute per point, I suppose. Firstly, in policing priorities. If you go to any police station in the country, you will find that the police officers who police this country are very au fait with the language of identity and with the Equalities Act and with protected characteristics. They are far less familiar with our history of free expression and free speech and the importance of protecting free speech. The practical reality is police officers get trained in one thing, i.e. the language of identity politics, and they don't get trained in the history of free expression. And it's something I see time and time again when I'm making representations on behalf of people who are accused of speech-related crime. Secondly, we see it in judicial priorities. Us lawyers like to pretend that judges are totally neutral, and they are completely impartial in their application of the law. But believe it or not, judges are human beings who are influenced by the discussions that we have in the national media and influenced by the attitudes that are prevalent among the legal class. So you'll note that this isn't specific to one particular group. You will have seen the extremely harsh sentences passed down on environmental activists by a judge at Southwark Crown Court. One of the lead conspirators given a sentence of 4 years, which is an extremely long sentence for what they were convicted of. So judges do have priorities, and they do use sentencing to send a message. And it's when they're using these sentences to send a message where they feel most empowered to be draconian. And then lastly, I think two-tier justice is reflected in the priorities of the legal class. Other lawyers like me, legal academics, people who are involved in talking about the law, there is a dominant political and moral worldview that exists among lawyers, and that becomes reflected in how we talk about the law, what the law should be, and how we should enforce it. So all of those things make us believe that comments relating to, say, the Israel-Palestine situation are less worthy of legal attention than, say, comments related to the riots. Now, that's certainly not an argument that we should police speech more. In fact, my argument is that we should police speech far less. That there is an argument to repeal almost all of the speech regulating legislation that we have on our statute book and starting again. And really, what I think we could explore in the discussion is that I think we have become complacent on defending important freedoms. We have, for example, come to believe that the Human Rights Act is the only way that we can defend our freedoms, when in fact, there is an argument to say that human rights and the decisions around human rights, particularly from the European Court of Human Rights, actually stand in the way of us putting up a more robust defense of things like freedom of expression and freedom of speech. But I'll leave that for the discussion. Just to conclude, the law is a really blunt instrument. And I think you come to realize when you're sat in a police station interview room with someone whose life is falling apart because of something they've tweeted in a moment of madness, that actually we need to think about the impact of law on people's lives a lot more. The law has the power to stop you living in your own home. It has the power to take your possessions from you and never give them back. It has the power to stop you working for months and months at a time. The physical toll can be extreme. The psychological toll can be extreme. And obviously, that is going to have an impact on the risks people feel comfortable in taking when they're making their arguments in the public realm. And that is where I think the impact on free speech truly lies.
Okay, thank you very much.